Welcome to Thriving After Breakup. This is a place where you not only learn tools and strategies on how to overcome your past or let go, but also find hope and know that your life isn't over yet. There is hope and you can overcome and create the future that you want with freely, with great confidence. You can move on in life. And today I have an incredible speaker. She is a psychotherapist. She is a marriage counselor. She teaches on communications, on relationships. She's a co-author of amazing books. So she knows exactly what she's talking about. So help me welcome Miss Linda Bloom. Miss Linda, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you today, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I am curious, or I just want to know, how did you get involved with topic of relationship? What got you interested into becoming a marriage counselor and do communication courses and so on? So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I had been a psychotherapist for many years, and my beloved husband and I got gridlocked about an issue. And we had been in relationship for 12 years and just had the normal challenges that couples have. And then he took a corporate job where he was flying all over the country in Canada for his work 3 weeks out of 4 when we had 3 little kids.
Wow.
And I was aggravated by that because we had made a contract with each other that we were going to raise our kids together. And here I am, like a 50s wife, bringing these kids up by myself. And we also had made a contract at the very beginning that we were going to mutually support each other's career development. And because we had 3 small children, I really didn't have very much time and energy to devote to my career. Well, we just couldn't get out of that gridlock, but we had good help. Not from a marriage counselor, let me tell you. We went to workshops and we had seminars that really helped us learn about how to be with irreconcilable differences, because we had a big fat one, and how to put your emphasis on what does work in the relationship and be in gratitude for what you do have and be forgiving of the other person that they're not living up to your romantic fantasy of what they must be, and to bring the conflict down, because we were fighting terribly. And we got through that time. He finally resigned from the corporate world and we started our own business and things started to get better right away. But we really learned a lot during that difficult time. Pain's a big motivator to learn. You know, if we have to have pain and suffering, we might as well make meaning out of it. And we got such good help that I really felt the impulse to pay it forward to other people who were struggling in their relationship. And there's millions of people confused and upset in their relationships. And so we just used all of that crappy stuff from that time that we struggled as compost to bloom out of. So that becomes, our wound becomes our gift to our community.
I love that. And thank you for sharing. That's an incredible story of just being even brave enough to admit that you have challenges in your marriage, because some people are just not willing to, even though they have those struggles. And so as you were talking about, what really stood out to me about the gratitude and forgiveness. So let's talk about in terms of we're talking about thriving after breakup, right?
Yeah.
So one of the big things when the breakup happens, it creates a lot of pain, right? And as you were talking about pain, I was shaking my head because I know in my life, pain was really growing me when I didn't want to, when I wanted to fix something in a very quickly, and sometimes were just foolish decisions. But So what you were sharing in your story, two things that really stood out. You were talking about gratitude and forgiveness. So let's talk about that a little bit. So through your experience and as you were talk to your clients, what would you say are the steps that when you hit that roadblock, let's call it, or something happens, like let's say a breakup happened, how would you say people can position themselves emotionally and in their heart so that instead of focusing what didn't turn out, they can really look at what actually what the benefits are out of that situation?
Great question. And when there is a breakup, the suffering can be horrible. It sometimes is the worst thing somebody's ever gone through. Mm-hmm. And they often in their mind go to fault finding and blame of the other person. And they can be really angry that they were betrayed, they were lied to, they were exploited, they were let down, or they can be really angry at themselves. I was such a fool. Why didn't I know better? Why did I walk into that house on fire? I should have known better. But it doesn't help. It's very common, but it's not useful. And if we can work with those intense feelings, and one of the things that I always offer to my clients is I am steadfast in my belief that we're always doing the best we can. Mm-hmm. With the level of consciousness that we've arrived at the time or haven't, and that other person who we may be so furious with, in a rage against them, they're doing the best they can too. Mm-hmm. With the level of consciousness that they've arrived at or have not yet. And some people are late to mature, may not just be young, inexperienced people in their 20s. They could be in their 30s. They could be in their 40s. They could be any age, but they may not have learned yet to appreciate how precious a relationship is, how fragile a relationship is, how much a relationship is like a living being that needs to be nourished and cleaned up. Mm-hmm. And if we can use the pain and suffering as a motivator to grow more compassionate and understanding and forgiving, that will position us well to see the beauty that was the relationship, that the visionary was very stimulated during that falling in love time. And it wasn't pure fantasy. It is some of it accurate of what could be, maybe not immediately. Maybe we have to work for years to manifest that lofty vision. Mm-hmm. But to have that creative part of ourselves and to have the open-hearted part of ourselves and to have the impulse to make a creative commitment, a commitment that's steadfast, that can last over time, to bring out the best in each other, that we're going to use everything that the relationship tosses up to grow. That's a beautiful deal to be making with another person. But for whatever reasons, they may not be up to it at this time in their life. And to let it be that each relationship is a stepping stone towards the one that could be the lifetime partnership.
Mm-hmm. And what curious your thoughts on this. So I love when you said about, when a breakup happens, we go into that place of whether blaming ourselves or blaming other people. And I have to admit, I'm guilty of that too. I've done my own share of that. But like you said, that really didn't help me get out of that space where I needed to be to move on. And so from your perspective, I think you touched on that. But okay, if the blaming and fault finding isn't working, what is working then?
Forgiveness is what works.
Yeah.
Forgiveness of others is usually easier. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's easier than forgiveness of self. And I will always be grateful to Stephen Levine. He is a very important meditation teacher, personal growth teacher, and a mentor to me. And he taught me forgiveness meditation. For a year, this was my main spiritual practice. And that you hold the person in your heart. You know, some people are very visual and they can actually see their face in their mind's eye. But if you're not visual, it's okay just to imagine that they're there and you call them by their name and you list the grievances and each one, and I forgive you. And you really weren't there for me in my time of need, and I forgive you. And you broke your agreements with me, and I forgive you. And you didn't turn out to be the partner of my dreams, but I forgive you. And I know you were doing the best that you can. And some days you sit there in forgiveness meditation and you say, no, I don't, you rat think. You're terrible, you asshole. And some days you can. And if you keep the practice up and you're determined and committed about the practice, it will lighten over time. And the forgiveness for self works the same. You hold yourself in your heart. Maybe you visualize yourself as a child. Do you know? It's a little more tenderhearted when you see yourself as a child and you call yourself by your name or your nickname. And you say, I know you were doing the best you could. And there were ways in which you contributed to the demise of this relationship, but you learned from it. And how wonderful that you're learning. And you're positioned well to make different mistakes in the next one, not the same ones. Or if you make the same ones, you can correct for them sooner. And to have that kind of compassion, do you know, for yourself and for the other person. People don't go into relationships, you know, trying to get revenge on the other person and to harm them. They want it to work out too. And it's a very tender-hearted process if you do it regularly, because sometimes the bitterness is so huge that you really have to chip away at it a little at a time. And it may take months. For some people, it takes years to get over a lost relationship.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. And even from the biblical perspective, their emphasis on really forgiving, because once we forgive others, God forgive us. And I can totally relate that while forgiving depends on the situation, forgiving is challenging. It's hard. I'd say not even challenging. It's hard sometimes. But the hardest thing is to forgive yourself, because it feels like we should have known better. I remember the line from me, you should have known better. Why did you behave this way? You know, why did you cause this pain to someone? And but I remember there was a time in my life where I had a hard time forgiving myself because I was just so harsh to someone that I loved. And I was really praying and asking God to help me show how he have forgiven me for all my sins, so that I can extend the same grace to others, because to myself and then to others, because I just didn't know how to do it on my own. And here is the thing, what I've learned through that forgiveness process, that I've learned to be human. Or I went back to my humanity of, okay, I can make mistakes, you know, and I will give myself grace and forgiveness for making those mistakes, because then as I forgive myself, I can extend the same forgiveness to others, because as I've learned myself that I am a human being who's making mistakes, and I can forgive myself, and I can extend the same grace to others who make mistakes, you know, on their own journey. And like you said, people don't plan to do harm. It just happens. So just forgiving each other, realizing we're all human beings who are making mistakes. And as we extend that grace, forgiveness, we can truly let go, right? And
That's right.
And move forward to say, okay, I forgive and I move on, right?
As long as we're learning from the mistakes.
Exactly.
As long as we learn from our unskillful choices.
Mhm.
The learning is so important because that's what allows us to let go.
Mm.
And some people don't even believe in forgiveness. They think that it's excusing the bad behavior on the part of the other person or ourselves. And it's not.
Mhm.
It doesn't excuse the bad behavior,
Yeah.
but it does lighten the heaviness that we carry when we carry grudges in our heart towards another person or ourselves. And so we can hold them accountable that they really did do harm, and we can hold ourselves accountable. And maybe we want to make amends for the harm that we caused to that person, or pass it on to others and do good works of different kinds. But it clogs up the works, it closes the heart, it keeps us in fear, the bitterness, and the anger and the rage keeps us stuck and heavy and mired down. It adds to our fear that we haven't learned yet to be positioned well to go on to have a healthy, wholesome relationship in the future. And for a lot of us, I'd go so far as to say most of us, we have to learn the hard way.
Mm.
And that pain,
Mm-hmm.
that is a motivator to learn, because people don't want to writhe in pain. And the way out is to do some self-examination about how was it that I got into a relationship like that and stayed in it. Sometimes people stay in them for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
before they finally extricate themselves from an unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship. And if we examine what it is that was going on there, fear of being alone, fear of being judged by other people as a failure, fear of being judged as ourselves for giving up too soon.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that can be learned from a difficult relationship while we're in it and after we exit it, if we are committed to using everything as a growth opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you saying that, because what we can look at the past relationship as a total failure, right? And we sometimes have such a hard time move from that failure into the future because we've already determined, because that failed, that relationship failed, the rest of the relationship we'll touch in the future will fail too. But it doesn't have to be this way, because like you said, if we learn from it, okay, so another thing that just thought pops in my mind, instead of thinking that the past relationship was a total failure, we can shift our mind to think, you know what? Yes, it failed, but I learned such a valuable lesson for my future, so that when I move into the future, I don't have to make the same mistakes because I've learned it in a painful way, right? And then it's like the breakup can be a blessing, right?
If we use it, because I don't even really believe in failures. I just believe in learning opportunities. Do you know?
I love
And
it.
it was a learning experience. The most impactful learning experiences give us the jet fuel, for the next phase of our life. I'd like to invoke the presence of Michael Mead for a moment, because I took a workshop with him and he gave me a visual. When you're in the polite layer, have a nice day, how are you, everything's fine, and people are pretty superficial, that we want to go to the enlightenment layers. We want to go to the highest that we can possibly live in well-being, happiness, joy, gratitude, contribution, all that good stuff. But you don't go from the polite layer to the enlightenment layer. You go from the polite layer and make the descent in the dark shadow realms. And there's pain and confusion and fear and all unpleasantness there. And a breakup of a relationship will send us down to make the descent into the darkness, but we push off bottom. That's the learning that goes on. And that jettisons us through the polite layer to the enlightenment realm if we
Mhm.
use it all. Do you
Yeah.
know? But you have to have a growth orientation. You have to live in the question of, what am I supposed to be learning here about what happened in my life, no
Mm.
matter what the events were. A breakup will do it. Having a difficult relationship with a child or an important family member or sibling, a parent, an aunt or uncle. Medical crisis will do it. A financial crisis will do it. A trauma, do you know, in the workplace. Any
Mhm.
of these dark, shadowy crisis events
Mhm.
can send us down into the dark realms. We hate to go there.
Yeah.
It's awful when we're there, but it can be just what we need to move us through to the next stage of life, which can be the best that we've ever had.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree because what comes to my mind, the analogy of I would never push myself into a challenging situation if that would be up to me. And at the same time, if I wouldn't go to places where it's hard and requires me to grow, then I would always stay in this comfort zone where I wouldn't grow at all. But I don't know if we don't, is that really the fulfilling life if we don't grow, right? On any aspect, whether it's a career, personal growth, relationships. And sometimes life, it's like an eagle just pushes their little birdies out of the nest to fly, right? Sometimes life kind of pushes in some direction where it requires us to stretch, where we gain new insight, new skills, and even learn about ourselves that, yeah, well, it was hard, but I can handle it now, right?
That's right.
And so my question to you is this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about when the breakup happens and just going back to fault finding, right? What are your thoughts about taking responsibilities for things that didn't work out? When the relationship ends, is that fair just to blame that person that it's all on him or her? Or is that fair to really look in the mirror and say, maybe I have done something that caused that? What are your thoughts on that?
It's much more skillful to stay out of the blame game.
Mm-hmm.
It is much more skillful to discern what part the other person played, distinct from the part that I played, because it's always a combination.
Mm-hmm.
It's not nice and neat that it's a 50-50 proposition. It's maybe, 60-40 or 70-30 or 80-20. Maybe it's 95% 5. But we always want to put the magnifying glass on the part that we played, even if it's the smaller part, because that's where the power is.
Mm-hmm.
The power to learn, the power to change, the power to grow, the power to become more skillful. And I think it's a good idea for people to have an exiting conversation if the other person is willing to have it,
Mm-hmm.
with a commitment to hopefully shed some light on why it didn't work, not to blame each other, but just to learn, because both people have a tremendous opportunity that will hold them in good stead going forward. Always with the guideline of, it took us a while to discover it, but we discovered that we were a mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can each say our part in why it is that we weren't good together and why we're mismatched, that's going to empower us to make a wiser choice with somebody who would be a good match going forward. And I always think that that's a kind, responsible way to end a relationship. And most people don't do it.
Yeah.
Most people leave taking parting shots.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even worse, I think, is people who ghost when they leave and they just disappear, and they won't answer our emails and they won't answer our voicemails and they won't see us anymore. They just disappear off of the earth. You can still get complete even if the person won't speak to you and have the exit conversation or exit conversations, because it's more of an inside job. You just look and you decipher what was theirs and what was yours, and come to the recognition that we were mismatched. And going forward, I got my feelers out now, because my bullshit detector is really much more finely tuned than it was before. And I'm going to find somebody that's on my level of consciousness and make a different set of agreements about honesty and full disclosure and commitment and no secrets and lies, and mutual respect and support, that I learned from this relationship didn't have those. And that's why we weren't a good match, or whatever the learning is. So I think exit conversations are good, but not to take parting shots.
Yeah. So do you, from your opinion on, what if it's been years since you parted your ways with someone else? Is that too late to conversation then? Because when breakups happen, sometimes it's just so heated where people just can't handle a peaceful conversation, right? So, but let's say years went by and people.
Never too late.
Okay.
It's never too late. There's no statute of limitations on getting complete. If it's still bothering you and it's years later and you finally have the courage to call them or email them or text them and say, I was thinking of you and I would love to see you, and just have a conversation. And they may need some reassurance that you're not going to get revenge and blame them. And they may need, for you to enroll them in what your purpose is. And I think it is good to take a contemplative pause, because the feelings are raging so high right after the breakup that you might not be very constructive and tactful and respectful about the way you would have the conversation. So definitely calm down first, but it doesn't have to take years. But if it took you years to get there, oh well, maybe they're feeling incomplete too and would welcome the chance to say what they learned. Maybe they want to apologize to you for their misconduct. Maybe they're seeking forgiveness as well. It can be nice to tuck it in.
Yeah, such a good point. I agree. If just make peace with that person, so that when you see them walking on the street or see something about them on social media or something, you don't have to kind of run away. If it's in person, run into different direction, because once you resolve it, it's like saying, we parted our ways. We've communicated, we've said everything that was said, and now it's like life. We just gotta move on in our own separate ways, but we don't have to avoid ourselves going forward.
And we don't have to wish them ill.
Yeah,
we wish them well. We weren't as evolved at the time. Or I wasn't ready for commitment, or you weren't ready for commitment, or whatever it was. And we can say, and I wish you well. I hope you find a relationship that, is a wonderful match for you and that you really are happy. I wish that for you, because that's our highest self operating there, not our little mean spirit and revengeful self.
Yeah, I totally agree. So my last question to you, so as we're talking about thriving after breakup, what are your final thoughts about how women can finally position themselves to move forward freely? What are the few things that you would suggest, or maybe steps that they would take?
One very important thing is to realize that when we have a serious loss, a relationship that meant a lot to us, that we had very high hopes for, and it doesn't work out, that the intensity of the feelings may not just be about that particular loss. Any unresolved, unfinished business from our past, where maybe a parent didn't die, but maybe they weren't there for us in the way we wanted them to be. Maybe we had a sibling we wanted to be closer to, and it was lost that we didn't have the closeness with the sister or the brother. And maybe it was a previous adult relationship. Maybe it wasn't a childhood loss, But any loss that we go through in the present will activate feelings that haven't been completely felt through for previous losses. So we may be stunned about the magnitude of the intense feelings that we're feeling. They might not only be about this particular breakup. So this is a big opportunity to go back and heal some of the losses and get complete on those as well. Mm-hmm. So to know it's a piece of work, it can't be done completely alone. If we have confidants, close friends in our life, family members, support group, women's empowerment group, that's going to help a lot, because this kind of grief needs to be witnessed. It's too big and it's too hot to hold it alone. Any grief needs other people there to bear witness to it and to hold it with us. Mm-hmm. You know, that's important. The other thing that I feel, the people who do best after a loss are the ones that have a good support network. Mm. The falling in love phase, when you're in infatuation, all you want to do is cocoon and be with the new lover. Mm-hmm. It's not a good idea to forsake all of your friends. Keep those relationships in good condition. Even if the relationship is a magnificent one, you still want your friends. But particularly if the relationship is troubled or doesn't make it, you really need your friends to reflect back to you your beauty, your attractiveness, that you're sexy, that you're desirable, that you're talented, that you've got plenty of things to offer, that you're not a reject, that you're not a failure. And we need support. The people who do best in life and thrive have a network of support that is a profound influence on their well-being. When they're happy, they're happier. And when they're unhappy, they're a little less unhappy.
Yeah, I so agree. What an incredible advice. I absolutely agree about support and knowing that sometimes when the experience the pain that we experience isn't always because of that small event, not small, but just because of the event we just faced. It may bring some other events we just haven't resolved. So powerful. Linda, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for your time. Such a pleasure speaking with you. What a wealth of information. Thank you so much again for being here, sharing your wisdom. Really loved it, and wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for the wonderful questions.
Thank you so much.